From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today was the 19th day of the legislative session, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty when tempers can get short and days can get long. That was the case today in the Senate, where business came to a crawl after State Senator Roger Smitherman of Birmingham began filibustering immediately after the chamber convened. Smitherman was upset about previous bills that passed, arguing that he wasn't properly informed about last-minute changes. The Senate was only able to pass one local bill, and when Smitherman promised to filibuster every other bill on the agenda, members decided to call it a day.
I'm going to read the bill out from the podium if necessary, and I'm going to have some extensive discussion on each one of them so I will fully understand and everybody in there will fully understand what's before us and what we're addressing. In fact, we had one bill in there that I read the bill and there was a certain way, but then we get a sub, and the sub has changes in it, and of course, if you notice on the floor that you have this small window with a sub to just present it out there on the floor prior to maybe being presented in committee or you getting a copy of it in advance. So and once it goes across that desk, you can kind of reach your hand over there, but it's gone. And so we're at a point now in the last third of the session, and there's a lot of things that's going to probably be coming across the desk, and I want to make sure that we have a complete understanding of them.
One issue Smitherman has been working on is the allocation of judges throughout the state. He's been working with fellow lawmakers to increase the number of judges so that circuits can avoid case backlogs. Senate Bill 39 would provide for the addition of 11 more circuit judges. It also creates a formula that bases the number of judges on the relative need and caseload.
So that they won't have to look and have a system that they have to take from who may think they have some surplus judges, in case I'm talking about Jefferson County now. But in fact, one of the things that hindered us was the way that some counties were counting cases and the formula that we were using. Where in our system, you may have a situation where a person have a DUI, then they have a reckless driving charge, then they may have a no insurance, you have to have the insurance card. Well, those are three distinct different cases. It's a different element when you're drunk or when you out there just driving across the line or when you don't have the insurance card. In our circuit, all three of those are put on the one case number. So when they ask we want the case numbers of all the cases you have, that's two cases that's left out of Jefferson County's count. Okay, what we're trying to make sure now, and not just Jefferson County, but this applies to everybody. Some folks were doing it like we were doing it, and some was doing it the other way. So now we're going to have a unified count of all the cases, so and as well as the complexity of cases.
The House had a productive day, considering a calendar of 19 bills. At the top of that list was a measure altering some internal legislative policies and, most notably, taking an important step towards the construction of a new state house. Senate Bill 222 from State Senator Sam Gavan would authorize the Legislative Council to contract with the Retirement Systems of Alabama to construct a new state house. It also acquires the land directly behind the current building where it would likely go. Lawmakers have talked about the need for a new legislative home for years, especially as this current building has fallen into worse disrepair, and it has proven inadequate as a place for people to come and observe and participate in the legislative process. State Representative Chris Pringle carried the bill in the House. It made several technical changes to internal legislative policy, but it was the State House part that received praise from Republicans and Democrats.
I have two friendly amendments that are coming today. One of them addresses the issue of the election contest. We're going to remove all that language that the other side has a problem with. It's all going to come out of the bill, so we're not going to remove it. The law will remain the same as it's been for over 120 years. The other amendment is going to fix the problem that my colleague discovered with the contract review provisions on the witnesses, names being redacted when the contract is public. Remember, the members of the committee will still see that. We have two friendly amendments coming from different members of the Democrat caucus to fix the problems that were expressed in the committee meeting and have been expressed to me since the day we passed the bill.
One thing that's on that bill, I give you all the applause in the world for. We're going to look for a new state house, okay? I mean, I don't think people understand, but right now I'm under a doctor's care. Every time I come in this building, I have to get under a doctor's care. My doctor told me, don't come in that building, don't go in that building without a mask because the mold and mildew. And I'm telling you, I have been sick coming into this building. Every time I come here, I was talking to someone this morning, and she said that she's had 3 surgeries for mold and mildew from this building. So it is truly time that we get serious about this situation and make this environment a healthy environment for us to come in here every day.
Senator Sam Gavan, who sponsored the bill, reminded us that it is not just a State House bill, but that was an important issue to address.
Well, first of all, SB 222 does more than that. There are several things that it deals with, including when we come into session. That is one of the things that the senators and House members have agreed upon the most, is that we'd love to start the first year of the quadrennium in February of each year instead of in March. But look, this building has got a lot of issues. I mean, that's what we talk about, being the people's house, but, you know, and hopefully we won't have to deal with another COVID situation again. But when we were in that, it truly was not the people's house. I mean, the people were locked out of it. And, you know, for a practical purpose. And so, you know, we do want to make it more accessible and to where, you know, more people can participate. You know, so many of these committee rooms, and, you know, a lot of the viewing public may not be so much aware about that, but, you know, we have a lot of people coming in that want to participate on some of these hot button issues. And, you know, the lobbyists are there early and they take up all the seats, and so there's not that much room for the public. And sometimes, I mean, you may have experienced that there may not be that much room for the press, too.
That measure passed 88-9 and now goes back to the Senate because amendments were added to the bill. Also passed in the House was legislation aimed at keeping the Chinese government or other Chinese entities from purchasing land in Alabama. House Bill 379 from State Representative Scott Stadhagen would prohibit non-resident Chinese citizens, the Chinese government, and other Chinese entities from acquiring a title to real property in the state. Some questioned whether this could stifle business opportunities, considering some Chinese companies that have landed in Alabama. Stadhagen said the measure was meant to protect property from falling into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party at a time when they are a geopolitical rival.
The concern of national threat from China, the communist country, it's a national threat right now. Mm-hmm. We've got military bases, which you know that you were in the military. Mm-hmm. Land's being purchased throughout our whole entire nation, and they're targeting certain places. So this will prevent any land being owned by a communist country around any military bases or anywhere by our ports, okay. Anywhere somewhere important where if they want to, they can actually utilize and use against us.
So you're saying that we want to prevent them from being able to establish military bases or harbors or anything like that here within the United States or within United States property?
To prevent them from doing anything to harm us in the future.
The bill passed 73-23 and now goes to the Senate. The House also took up legislation altering the scope of practice for optometry in the state. These bills are always controversial, and this one generated plenty of debate as well. House Bill 349 from State Representative Danny Garrett would allow optometrists to perform certain vaccinations that are right now limited to ophthalmologists, but it would prohibit them from using the word surgeon in their advertising. It also makes some adjustments to their regulatory structure. Garrett fielded plenty of questions about the bill's effects.
Optometrists operate across the state in 57 counties. Contrast that to ophthalmologists only being located in 24 counties. Now, I want to point out that the optometry law has not been expanded since 1995. I'm going to dwell on that just a minute. 1995 was the last time that the optometry law had been expanded.
This bill would allow the ability for those that are at least in our communities to be able to serve the people in the community.
That bill passed 78-6 with 18 abstentions. It now goes to the Senate. Let's take a quick look at other bills that moved in the House today. Senate Bill 228 from State Senator Dan Roberts would amend real estate law to require home buyers to disclose whether or not a purchase is part of a wholesale deal. It would also deem unenforceable certain unfair service agreements purporting to establish a long-term right to list between real estate companies and residential real estate owners. It passed unanimously and now goes to the governor. House Bill 287 would criminalize doxing, or publicly exposing someone's personal information with the intent to encourage harassment. That bill passed unanimously and goes to the Senate. Senate Bill 155 from State Senator April Weaver is aimed at fixing the state's physician workforce shortage through various measures to encourage more doctors. It passed unanimously and now goes to the governor. And Senate Bill 204 from State Senator Sam Gavan. Those who work in and around the legislature will appreciate this bill. It changes the legislative meeting schedule so that outside of election years, the legislature will begin to meet in February and not March. Currently, sessions tend to stretch well into June. Election year sessions will continue to start in January. And that's what happened in the legislature today. Coming up next, I'll speak with State Senator Garlan Gudger about a range of issues, including the 988 mental health hotline. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Birmingham native David Wayne Perkins is a rock and R&B guitarist, singer, songwriter, and session musician. As a session musician at Muscle Shoals Sound Studios, Perkins backed several big-name musicians. He provided lead guitar overdubs on 3 tracks on Bob Marley and the Wailers' 1973 album, Catch a Fire, and was hired by the Rolling Stones to play lead guitar on 3 tracks on their 1976 album, Black and Blue.
Joining me next is State Senator Garlan Gudger from Cullman. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, here we are, and this was day 19
Yes.
of the session, so really 11 days left, really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm.
You started to see some, tempers and maybe short fuses on the Senate floor today. I mean, basically shut down a day, so I guess that tends to happen at this point in session, right?
Once the budget goes, you kind of change your mindset from, if you can use football terms, from offense to defense, right? And as the budget goes, you start getting bills coming through there, and the budget can't be used against you or to leverage against you. So people start trying to turning a different cheek, and they start, trying to kill bills instead of trying to get bills passed. And so I think you started seeing the first day of that since the budget's gone, and we'll see more of it coming up. But that's just part of this legislative process that we use.
It's the way it goes. Well, I want to talk about legislation you've already passed.
Okay.
That is in state law now. It was part of the game plan package that we made such a big deal about. It wasn't economic development incentives. It was transparency.
Correct.
We've got all these incentives that we've updated them now. We've got all these sites, different sort of pots of money. But you passed a bill saying, okay, all of that, whatever we use on a project, needs to be posted online for transparency.
Correct.
Tell me why you went that route and what all this bill does.
I believe it's important to have transparency in any type of government. I was a local city councilman for 16 years. I've been in the Senate now for 5 years. And I think anytime that the public can see where their money's going, that's a positive. And I think people want to know where their taxpayers' money is going. So by having a website, that Department of Commerce would be listing out certain things. How much is this company going to give the state of Alabama for capital outlay for their buildings? How many jobs are they going to create? What's their return on investment supposed to be versus what it really is by the time we give them those incentives? Because remember, we will give those incentives a year later after they've invested. I think that's one of the popular things about the game plan in our program that we've used in the past in the Department of Commerce and Director Canfield is that we don't do that up front. We're not dangling a carrot in front of them like most people think. We do say, this is your incentives, but if you invest 1 year later to prove that you've done what you said you're going to do, then you get those incentives. But people want to know how much those incentives were and is their return on their investment. And so that's what was going to be on that website.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the old days it was essentially cash.
Exactly.
Right? Borrowing money and giving corporations cash. This is a lot different. And I think Secretary Canfield said, look, this is no different than information that if you made a public information request, you could get it. So you're just making it more accessible and maybe better understandable.
Yeah, and I think it's easier for people to get online. You know, obviously in today's world than it has been in the past. People have access and can research and they can find this information out, but why do we not go ahead and make it accessible to people that is at their fingertips so they're able to do that? There's also an internal board that I created through the legislative process that if we have questions through the year, we have a joint board from the House and the Senate, both represented obviously, with our budget chairs and our economic development chairs, and they are able to come together, create a form, pass that to the Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, and us be able to get the information that we need to make sure that during the year that we are on track so that the taxpayers are getting a return on their investment. So I think it's important for all Alabama.
Oversight, yep.
That's correct.
Switching gears, I had Chairman Reynolds on the show the other day, and I know that y'all are working together on this 988 legislation.
Yes.
This is essentially what 911 is for emergencies and things like this. This would be for mental health crisis.
That is correct.
Walk me through this bill.
All right, so 911, everyone knows throughout the state and throughout the country that is for public safety. 988 would be the same thing except for mental health issues. If you're dealing with someone with substance abuse, if you just see someone walking down the road talking to themselves but you feel like they could be a threat to themselves, if you have a young person that is cutting themselves, if you have someone that has schizophrenia, if you have someone that just needs help in your family and you don't know where to go, most people call 911 and law enforcement would show up and they would take them to the hospital or to the jail. Neither one of those two places are equipped to handle these type of patients because it's different than physical issues that they have. It's really more mental issues. So from that, we're just running this rat race, just a hamster in a wheel, per se, for the fact that we're taking them to, we're using law enforcement and the resources we have there and using up our personnel, and that costs money. We're taking them to the hospital or jail using our taxpayers' money, and they're not equipped to really handle these issues. That is causing taxpayer to pay more money. So why don't we correct that problem and have a 988 number that people can call and know there's a distinction between the 911 and 988, and from that we are able to call a trained specialist, analyze the patient, figure out what they need, and then from that, some people just need help in staying away from someone in violence, and they're just so distraught that they've been in a violent situation. They just need to be away in a safe environment. Other people have substance abuse, and we're going to be able through 988 to be able to provide that protection and be able to save the taxpayers money in the end, because it's a savings if we're not running that same hamster in the wheel race that we've been running for the last 10 years.
And it would add a user fee onto your phone bill, essentially, right?
That is correct.
And so I could imagine where anytime you're going to raise a fee, even though it's just 98 cents,
yes.
Anytime you raise a fee, people are going to have problems with that or issues with that. So how are those conversations going?
And those conversations are going exactly what you think. As the Republican, part of the Republican caucus, we do not want to raise taxes. We do not want to raise fees. If I had to raise taxes on anything, it would be mental health. The bad thing about raising those fees is that there is a chance from anywhere from 50 cents to 98 cents that we could land on, but that provides enough money for us, at the same time providing the same amount or more savings from not using personnel that we're using right now from the fire, police, the sheriff's department, the EMS that are taking these patients now to the jail and to the hospital. We're saving money from people not going to the jail and the taxpayer money going to that, pay for that. Then also taking them to the hospitals where we're having to pay for that indigent care. So I think the savings alone will end up being a break even for the way that this 50 cents to 98 cents will cost. We haven't landed on a price yet. I'm hoping it would be the highest, which would be 98 cents. But there's a clause built into this also. So the poverty-stricken of the state of Alabama is very exact on this, making sure that they do not have to pay this fee too, because if you're in the poverty levels living in Alabama, you do not have to pay any extra taxes or fees, but you still get access to 988.
Yeah. Well, look, things cost money. Services cost money.
Right.
And I don't hear anybody complaining about 911 fees because it's just sort of ingrained that, yes, okay,
Exactly.
We pay this fee with the expectation that if I call 911, somebody's going to be there and they're going to respond. That's just sort of understood. So,
Correct.
It's maybe just sort of building that conversation around this too is going to be an expectation that anytime you call 988, that mental health service is going to be available.
Correct. And I think the part of those fees that there's going to be paid, they produce crisis centers, brick and mortar places. And right now we have them kind of in the big four throughout the state. So the people have actually beds in a small mental health hospital to go to. They are analyzed, see what they need. Once they're taken care of, then they can be dismissed from that particular, I'm going to say hospital, or the crisis brick and mortar unit. There's also mobile crisis units that this fee will pay for. So in rural Alabama, like I am in my whole district, if you are in Winston County, there's not going to be one of the brick and mortar places, but they do have, if there's an issue, they can send out, for example, like an ambulance, a mobile crisis unit to your door if there's a problem that they have called in, see what's going on in the mental health, and that mobile unit is just as important to have somebody on site to take care of that particular patient as it is getting them into a mental health hospital. So I'm excited about the future that we have not been able to fund mental health properly since it was cut in the Great Recession in 2010. This is the first time anywhere from 50 cents to 98 cents per phone line that we are able to get mental health back where it needs to be and funded, so you're not seeing the wide rampant spread that you see in today's society.
I know that bill's in House Committee tomorrow, so we'll be watching that moving forward. Switching gears again, I want to talk about this child care issue.
Okay.
You've got this, I don't know if the bill's dropped yet, but you have this tax credit.
Yes.
Working with Manufacture Alabama to provide more resources, maybe just a little bit of help with child care as it pertains to workers.
I think in being the chairman of economic development in the Senate, one of the biggest hurdles that we're facing throughout the state and really throughout the nation is finding workers to be able to show up and be able to do their job through a full day and stay there consistently. One of the biggest deterrents of that is not having child care. And so if we were able to, through the legislature, to give a tax credit to the employer and to the individual to be able to provide child care, we're going to have a lot more workers coming in that want to work, but currently they can't. You know, for example, single mothers. There is a lot of single mothers that call and say, we'd like to do this, but there's not a daycare and not anywhere close to me. And so how do I do this? If an employer provides that, then they'll be able to get the tax credit for that child care and still allow for that mother to go to work, provide workers for the industries, and then be able to still be close to their child and be able to be close to their child when they go home and get a paycheck.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I can't tell you how many guests we've had on here that maybe we don't even intend to bring it up, but it comes up because workforce is such a problem post-COVID, finding employees, and it just keeps coming up, the issue of child care. We had Neil Wade on here and his foundation about raising money and again providing these resources.
Right.
So how have your conversations been with your colleagues when you bring up this idea? Are they warming to it?
They are warming to it, and they understand the need for it, and that's the greatest thing, is that when you have the right people, I feel like, in office, they're going to be able to understand that there are needs, especially with economic development. The questions that I'm getting back are positive questions and things that we need to think through. I'm excited about the future of where that bill is going to be able to go, and by having the questions brought to us as far as how do we provide this tax credit, because right now there's approximately 40-something bills, if I'm not mistaken, that are tax credits that are in the system that are still in process. Which ones are going to make it? Which ones aren't? My job is to make sure we get the conversation started, to drop the bill, to push this as hard as I can because I believe in it. And if it happens this year, then I'm all in. Obviously, if it's not, then I'm going to bring it back next year because I think it's important enough for the state of Alabama to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've been busy down in the House with lots of different,
Yes,
lots of different tax bills. Well, look, we're out of time. Thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about these issues, and we'll be following them going forward.
Thank you so
Senator
much.
Garlan Gudger from Cullman.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Kate Cumming was a Civil War nurse and diarist whose writings are an invaluable source on Southern nursing, Confederate hospitals, and women's experiences in the war. Born in Scotland, Cumming spent her formative years in Mobile and strongly identified herself as a Southerner. After the end of the Civil War, nurses were among the first Southerners to publish their observations of the conflict, and Cumming published her now famous diary in 1866.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 10:30 with more coverage of the Alabama legislature right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.